in very simplistic form, from extraction to processing to manufacturing to export, meaning that you export what you manufacture. Or if you want to lose that bit of value capture, you at least export what you process. But if you are going to be at the lowest where we are today, you export raw. And then you lose all the value that will come from processing, from manufacturing, all the way. And because each stage multiplies value and creates job, creates income. And more importantly, too, helps us in managing the exchange rate. We've tried many times to meet with the governor of the central bank to support this program. And I'm saying it because the director representing the director of the central bank is here. We've done a whole lot to see if we could sit down with Cardoso to let him join hands with us in this campaign, because that's the way to go. We have not been able to do that. And I'm a government person, so I'm not bringing it up here as a report, but to see if you can as well help us. So we are trapped in the extraction phase. This is well-known story. We are tending towards 400 million by 2050 approximately. And this is our story. How we moved from a diversified commodity base to a non-polarized, oil-dependent model. So, and in all of this, perhaps you may not see this, but I will just show you. The manufacturing band, okay, not here, is here. It's between 8 and 10% percentage share of manufacturing to GDP. That's the value you're looking for as a country. And the reason for this is because we're trapped in weak. We don't have strength in backward and forward linkages, and I'm going to explain them very shortly. We are commodity export dependent, which again we have already mentioned, and because of that, we have very low domestic value capture. Capturing value is the more you go higher in the value chain development, you capture more value, and then we have limited integration into global value chains. So this is not like story. So there are a lot of theories, a lot of works, previous efforts to explain this. As a matter of fact, Nigeria's industrialization is actually supposed to be based on resources that we have. It is there in the industrialization agenda. And the expectation is that we should utilize at least 80% of our resources to drive industrialization. We're not anything near that. That's actually what is in the policy. That's what's in the program. But we're not anything close to that. So the theoretical foundation, I'm going to go back again. I started with, we wouldn't even have religion, or we wouldn't have the pathway to heaven if we don't have raw materials. Because I don't know how much of Christian religion went to Asia. Why was it be Africa? Eh? Anyway, so the same kind of thinking was what they gave to us at some point. And in the 90s, Prof should be able to help me here. In the up to early 90s, you were not hearing much about static comparative advantage. It would just teach you comparative advantage. Afterwards, you then begin to see dynamic and static. Some kind of differentiation. And I'll tell you why. And a lot of us have actually drawn government policies, built government policies, or developed government policies around this comparative advantage theory, trade theory. And what it says essentially is that regardless of how strong you are in producing different commodities, different items, and all of that, you should just look at where you have the least opportunity, loss, or cost. And that is the one you should trade with your neighbor. And we carried it like the Bible, fed our children with that, including myself. And when you're talking about it, you'll be citing this comparative trade theory, as if it's the gospel that we must follow. And this comparative trade theory actually was quite destructive, particularly if you now invoke the more recent discrimination between static and dynamic, comparative trade theories. What it says is that if you have strength in cocoa, have strength in manufacturing, have strength in all of this, that you're not going to look at for that one that you have the least opportunity cost. Maybe here and now it should be cocoa, and that's what you should be exporting. So we got locked into that because that's where, quote and unquote, where we have the lowest opportunity cost. Commodities. Our teachers taught that. Those who left schools went into policy development on the basis of that. Just as Europe changed the mindset of Russia on socialism by sending them literature books. So they will be reading things that look like Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. And their mindset were just shifting. So we were fed with some of this mindset, were really locked in that this is actually the way to go because this is a theory. And then the theory locked us into that this is the way to go, commodities. So that's one. But there is another hypothesis which says that this is a trap. And the trap is quite obvious. We have seen that over the years, how we are trapped. But we couldn't get out of this trap because we've not started challenging some of these theories in the things that we do. So the Prebisch-Singer's theory says that commodity, when you get yourself locked into commodities, that you also lock the opportunity for more skills, more technology, better technology for processing. The prices keep declining. In fact, you just be a price taker and you do not improve. You do not be like any other nation. So your terms of trade worsen. So we're going to show like a chart showing much of that. Dwell on the theory supporting all that we're going to be discussing, which is the resource-based industrialization. Means deepening, industrial deepening rather than just export. That's all that we have been saying since, and transforming resources into industrial ecosystem. But I want to draw our attention to the linkages. So the linking of this RBI to the Ike-Muonso's linkages. The first one is backward linkage, is important. The second one is forward linkage, is also extremely important. It has to be clearly articulated as such, defined as such, and then implemented as such. And the third one is the fiscal linkage. On the backward linkage, you deliberately build the architecture or the infrastructure or the skills required for efficient extraction. On the forward linkage, you also deliberately have policies that will lead to the processing into intermediate goods. This is where raw material is playing at present. And the third one is to use the finances or the revenue gained from all of this to build the infrastructure, the technology, the education, the skills in whatever form to push for the RBI. So this model is explained in this. So in the first one is the resource base. We have a very simplistic model depiction. We have agricultural raw materials, we have solid minerals, we have energy resources, we have wastes. Wastes are actually assets. And then we have human capital. So all this constitute the resource base, but this is a very simplified, very, very simplistic model. So this If you link this properly, so you link either backward to local sourcing of inputs, either forward to the processing of these materials, or lateral linkage to the clusters, using clusters and SMEs to drive the event for surplus. And then, of course, the right set of institutional coordination to achieve this. And tied to that is when this becomes reasonably successful, you now begin to have technical skill, or even before that, to be successful, you have technical skills, the R&D innovation, quality standards. I'll explain all of this as we progress, but just to lay the background, the foundations, the frustration and access to finance. But you cannot lie here. If you stay here, you will still be maybe slightly better than where we are today. So you just have to upgrade. You have process upgrading, product upgrading, functional upgrading, and chain upgrading. This is the primary commodity export. This one, you have the primary commodity export. And this is from 1960. So you can see at some point, what we realize from this primary commodity export, we could substantially cover our import of manufacturers, which is this line. But when the Prebisch Singer trap set in, you could see that from here, that sometime before 1980, around 78, we've not been able to recover from this. So this is a margin of value loss, failure to capture value that we ordinarily should capture. That is the heart, that is the root of poverty. That is why we have not had the prosperity that we should have. This simply explains it. Because you need to supply more and more and more and more and more of this to be able to get this. And even now, unfortunately, even with the oil, maybe at some point we'll say with the oil, but even with the oil. So, because oil, no matter how we beat about it or play with the nomenclature or play with it, it's a natural resource. It's the same thing. And we have also not treated it as any special resource in any special form. We sell them crude, pure and simple, just like selling palm oil crude or extracted oil from granite and selling it crude. And then look at what other countries, 4 countries have done. China, India, Brazil, South Africa, and Kenya. 5, actually. I just inserted Nigeria. This one is the value addition. What some other countries have done. If you look at China, in 2006, 10 years ago, value addition as a share of total exports, that's selling manufacturers, value added products, 92.1%. It has been consistent, just fluctuating narrowly within that band. India, the same thing. Brazil, almost the same thing. Although Brazil is dropping. South Africa, our brother, look at this band, and it's been consistent too, dropping a little bit. So what they've done to our raw materials, the Indians, and I don't, anywhere I come and I see Indians, and I'm very sorry, since I became the DG CEO, I chose not to travel out of the country until that bill becomes law. Because they've told me, not because I want to save money, not I want to save money, because they can kill me. Yeah, because once you block that, you've blocked a whole lot of things. Yeah, I don't want people to corner me somewhere and then they just shoot you and the whole thing dies. Because I know how some people opposed it, how some people were paid to, and they positioned themselves as economists and they challenged that bill. And I don't know how anybody born in Nigeria, born in Africa, would challenge that, unless they didn't know how you were born. The Indians they partitioned the grains, agricultural produce, and said this is our own territory. The Olams, down to Fio. You don't know what they call Fio. If you're an Igbo person, you know what they call Fio. Fio takes 18 hours to be done before you can eat it. It's only meant for people like us that grew up humble, from very humble backgrounds. If you have people like Otumba, you wouldn't know it. You don't know what it is. Because I heard you saying soya beans. Soya beans is all Fio. Fio is not soya beans. In the village, Fio, they use firewood. It can't use gas to cook Fio. You can't use kerosene to cook Fio. So you get your wood, put it outside, then put the distance and go to work. You go to work. By the time you're coming back, all you need to do is just use something and then you see it's done. So you can now begin preparing it into food. Now, these Indians won't allow us to have it. They mop up everything, they aggregate everything, because they have the skills, the technology, the education required to discover different ingredients, different things that are there, and they see how they can substitute other things that they have and still bring them back here as manufacturers. And in fact, as painful as it is, they don't go anywhere. They have small rooms or an apartment. They put their small machine. They go there. They do the discrimination. They do everything there, and then they have somewhere they start manufacturing. They just do made in India, and they sell it at the price, or made anywhere, and they sell it at the price of imported ones, appropriating the value beyond the value of improvements in the value. They also include the value that they would have lost in logistics. They capture all of that because they do it right there. The Vietnamese have taken the cashew. Cashew is Vietnam. Ginger too. And we just fold our hands. But of course, sometimes you don't blame us, because if you don't check the cost of processing, electricity and all of that, they become constrained in some sense. But again, the education, the common facility, and all of that can come. We can do a whole lot to correct that. But I'll come to that too. But even with all of that, in terms of the complexity, the ranking in complexity index, which is about the diversity of products, look at where yours truly is. For countries that have diversified products, manufacturers, this is the color codes. Because of the light, you won't see the color code, but Nigeria actually belongs to the one that is less than 5%. And in fact, if you drill further, Nigeria is actually about 2%. And it's very easy for us to actually diversify and, bubble up in the rank in economic complexity index. These are some raw materials that are of importance, but this was at some point, they change. But I'm still going to use this. So if you look at wheat, for instance, we import 5.2 metric tons. We produce 0.25 metric tons. We can actually get all the wheat we need in this country from our soil. Very easy. Very, very, very easily. And in terms, so what we call import availability ratio, we're very low. So you can now do for sugar, quite low. Sugar we have in abundance. Iron ore that we have, which was why you started talking about Ajokuta still in the first instance. Fertilizer, cotton, just be looking at that. None is up to 1%. Gypsum is only here that, and I'm going to show you something that explains why. These are levels of domestic value addition to some. For limestone, we have done relatively well. So we're processing between 70 and 90, and basically because of the BUA, the cement people. Lord, the chairman said, it's the private people that are driving this. Then look at cocoa. That was why the president screamed. Cocoa is 10 to 20%. And the reason is there's a man who has a factory for processing cocoa, but he cannot get cocoa. He cannot get it because the Indians bid him out. They price him out. So he would check, the man would check cost of electricity, cost of logistics, cost of all of this. Like, I'm again going back to the chairman. So when they put all of that, the man will say, okay, I will not pay more than this. The Indians will pay more up to that. Because I'll tell you the reason. They also have ways of deriving a lot more from that cocoa than the man will do. The man will probably do cocoa powder, but they can do a whole lot out with that. Just like what happens with that crude oil. You take the crude, they take the crude. The only thing you get and you still pay for it is petrol. But a whole lot of other derivatives, and thank God for Dangote. Anybody who is African, who is Nigerian particularly, should be praying for that man. So we know now that the way out is a summary in four levels. When you export raw, which I've said it won't work. When you process a little bit, which we are campaigning for, because we're just saying 30%. As a matter of fact, let me now say this. Maybe I'm not supposed to have said it because this is a secret. When we took our paper to the president, he said, why 30%? We give you the power to determine on value chain basis the percentage, because some should be actually 70% minimum level of processing, should be as high as 80%, not 30%. So there are things we cannot say we are exporting. Look at what happens to onions, for instance. Sokoto is massive on onions. Sokoto, Kebbi, that belt, but they lose 50% of it. And all these are Maggi, all those seasonings, no onions now. All those seasons are onions. So, but there are species of onions. They are white, what called white onions. So they extract all of those seasonings. So when you eat Maggi, you just know you're eating onions, maybe concentrated in some form. But we lose 50% immediately. And what happens is that the farmers compensate. How they compensate is they know from point one that they're going to lose 50% of it, because they don't have the facility for storing and they don't have facility for. So what they don't do is they multiply the price. So if they're supposed to have collected 20%, assuming none is lost, they make it 40% because they know that half will be lost. I'll just take you a little bit just to evoke again this feeling. Cashew, a ton is $1,250 in that raw cashew, that form. But if you bring out that one inside, the one we eat, just that one, oh, not the back, you get 7,800. What's difficult? What's difficult is shell it out. Once you get this, you have like 6.2 times the value capture gap. So that's what we lose. And Vietnam processes everything it has, and then it comes to Nigeria, comes to other African countries, and then they speak good English for you, and they collect everything, and they go back again to their place. They carry everything. And then our farmers, the people who pick them, will be happy that they're making profit. They're not making anything. Cocoa is fair. 7.2 or 7,200. If it's in the raw form, if you export, if you process a bit, it's 14,500. 2 times the value. I just selected it. Lithium, if you sell raw, which we do, and in fact, we don't even know that we're exporting lithium, because they look for the nearest. Because if I bring lithium to you now and bring some other, so you never identify that this is lithium, or you can call all of them lithium. So they know the one that's lithium, and then that one that's not lithium, they also put it together with it. But if you sell actually true raw lithium, 3,000 per ton. But if you process it a little bit, 30,000. 10 times the value. 10 times the value. So nickel, we're not going to nickel, but we also have that. You can see nickel, 17,200. Just, even if we don't have 2 places in this country, government sets up one place, just one facility in the entire country where you can do this. You have 85,000. Just for, when you say processing, all you need to do is to discriminate. So you can isolate that. And maybe isolate that nickel, the one that they require. You have 85. So, and Indonesia, when it banned the export, it is here that banning, that we understand international trade and say don't ban or don't protect, is here. We have an array of economists that understand comparative advantage. And then they will tell you how it's one of the classical trade theories and all of that. And then this is what we should be doing. And then they will tell you how it is no longer the norm in international trade to say that you're protecting. I don't understand. Some person will come and collect your stuff. Just flies for 8 hours, goes to the other place, put your something inside one machine, get their people to transform it a little bit, and they still have reserve that they can use to get the other things. So, and then bring the thing same back to you. And you tell me I shouldn't protect myself? So there are a number of barriers to this. And I've, in the course of this, I've mentioned a number of them. The first is energy. Energy is a big issue. Anytime we talk about 30% volatility, one of the things people talk about is energy. Where are they going to get electricity? But the number of efforts that the government has put in place, even though the chairman did not want to acknowledge that, he flatly reduced the efforts that the government is making in that regard, as if nothing is happening. The whole lot's happening in the energy sector. But even apart from government, the reality is also that there are non-government driven efforts around the energy sector. Solar, lights, and all of that. And we don't need to start with powering big engines, big equipment, big manufacturing facilities. Teach our people in the village to turn groundnuts, to first of all extract the oil in groundnut before they turn it into kurikuri or into something else. And to package the kurikuri in some form that the Igbo man will accept. The things we call equivalencies. Look at the standards, the quality expectations in that country. Bring it in and do the kurikuri in such a way that it will meet those quality expectations, the equivalencies. So first, you have already derived the oil, crude, which you can process into other things. And the equipment for some of these things are not quite expensive. Before you use it, you just put it through it to compress and get you the oil, crude, which you can refine, which you can use in other things. On the last count, our people are working on logistics map for raw materials, because we feel that one way to go is to develop clusters and also develop corridors to those clusters, so that it becomes easy to get those raw materials to clusters, and clusters become more effective ways. If we can do that across the country, we have spoken to the president, and we are requesting that we have raw material processing clusters in every senatorial zone, so that we can have common facilities based on what is available, the raw materials available in those localities, and the kind of skill set and interest that those people have. There's nothing more dangerous than ignorance. Even if you don't have money, if you're knowledgeable and you can act with speed, because that's what entrepreneurship is all about. The ability to discover, find out where opportunities are, and act with speed to take advantage of those opportunities.